Well, it is nice to know that the Giants can beat one team. Unfortunately, that team is themselves, but... Oh, God. I had a bad sports weekend. I went to go see the Orioles-Yankees game on Saturday, which is why I'm kind of in this get-up, because I'm still in an O's mood. And they're so far ahead in their division, they're pretty much a lock for the playoffs at this point. And in a 4-game series against the Yankees, they won 3 of them. Guess which game was the one they lost? The one I went to. I'm kind of a jinx for the Orioles. I have never seen them win a game live. It's unbelievable. I have never seen the Orioles win a game live, all the times I've been to games. It's kind of crazy, but, you know, them's the breaks, I guess. And I feel a little silly sporting a John Cena-esque wardrobe here. I'm even wearing the jorts, but, you know, it's what I felt comfortable wearing tonight. But, yeah, had a bad sports weekend, but on the professional wrestling side of things, I've got a lot to talk about, namely NXT Takeover 2, which I'm here to review, and WWE's Night of Champions, which is happening this Sunday, and I'm going to be previewing that as well, and also working in some discussion about Monday Night Raw, and, you know, the less than stellar quality of some of the recent shows. But going into NXT TakeOver 2, let me start off by saying that I became a fan of NXT because I was so impressed with the first TakeOver show that they did. I have not seen Arrival, and I think I want to watch it because everybody keeps raving about that Cesaro-Sami Zayn match, and I haven't seen it yet. But and I'm sure watching it 6 months after the fact, or however long it's been, you know, would kill some of the drama and some of the enjoyment, especially since I know what the finish is. But I still want to see it, just to see what all the hullabaloo was all about or whatever. But I watched the TakeOver special that they did in May, and I was thoroughly impressed with it, and I've been watching NXT ever since, and I've been thoroughly impressed with NXT. I like the way they present their show. I like that it's a 1-hour format. I like that everything has a slow burn to it. I like that the characters are actually entertaining and make sense, and the feuds make sense. I like that the champions are kept strong. I like that the contenders are built up by getting a series of wins. Everything on the show just seems to make sense. And it's basically just basic Wrestling 101 done fairly well, and I appreciate that. So I've been a fan of NXT ever since I saw that first show, and it was wonderful. And they've been building towards the second takeover called Fatal 4-Way. And I watched it, and I was once again impressed with it. It was just a well-booked, very good television special, and part of the reason I enjoy the 1-hour format of the regular NXT shows is that it keeps them from blowing their load too quickly. I don't get sick of seeing people. I don't get the same matches every single week. They change things up, and everything just feels like it's a more natural and evolving storyline rather than just repeating the same old stuff over and over again and giving pay-per-view matches every single week, which can, you burn through everything when you do that. And NXT hasn't done that, and it allows their special shows to really stand out as really big deals, and they really do deliver when they do these things. It's it's really quite enjoyable to watch, and I love it. But getting into the show itself, the only things about it that I didn't care for, the hair match stuff didn't really click with me. I didn't think the match was that good, and the comedy, a lot of that wasn't very well done either. And normally NXT actually does their comedy fairly well. And Enzo Amore, and I'm going to make this point later, if he goes to the main roster, he will suck. I want to make that point right now, because they will do nothing but the entrance, which is a really long dialogue, the whole thing that he does. It's really long. And if he makes it to the main roster, that's all the WWE is going to do with him. Because I've seen them do it before. They did it with Brodus Clay and the Funkasaurus. All he was an entrance. They've done it pretty much with Adam Rose. They did it to Fandango. And I think they would do that to Enzo Amore. And, I could also use the New Age Outlaws and Conan and WCW as examples of that as well, where it just becomes just this 2-bit entrance that's just the same thing over and over again. And I think that would happen to Enzo. But when he's backstage and when he's talking naturally, he does have some funny lines. Like, on this show, he had a line when he was talking to Big Cass where he was like, seeing is believing, like that Sasquatch was telling me about. And just really weird lines like that. He's just such a really wacky personality that I think he's really funny, even with the repetitive entrance, because there's more to him than that. But unfortunately, that was kind of the one line he had was kind of the only funny thing that happened with the hair match stuff. I just didn't think it was that funny, and I don't think it clicked all that well. The other problem with the show, I typically like Renee. She was off tonight. This was not one of her better call jobs, and she was kind of botching all over the place and sounded very awkward, but she didn't do a very good job, which is still better than the announce team on Raw. Still less annoying than that, but she did not do a very good job that night, and I hate to say that because I typically like her, but the rest of the show I thought was booked fairly well. The tag title change, they built up a team, Kalisto and Sin Cara, through a series of wins, built them up to a title shot, they won, and you have new tag team champions after keeping the Ascension so strong and so unbeatable that it felt like a big deal that they lost the tag titles to Sin Cara and Kalisto. So, solid booking there. I've forgotten his name already. Baron something. I forget his name. He faced CJ Parker in a match that was unannounced. I was like, okay, I don't know what. They're just killing time here. And I thought it was going to be a jobber match win for CJ because the Baron dude got the jobber entrance and he killed CJ in like 8 seconds. I was like, whoa, where the fuck did this guy come from? And it was actually cool the way they did it. And I don't want to put this level of expectation on him, but it reminds me of when Goldberg beat Hugh Morris on Nitro, and it was Goldberg's debut, and nobody expected him to win, and he actually had a very dominating win, and it was actually really impressive. It was like, who is this Goldberg guy? And I kind of thought the same thing here, because I don't know anything about this guy, and I've never seen him before. So when I saw him just kill CJ Parker in pretty cool fashion, I mean, that finisher looked pretty cool. I was like, who is this guy? I've never heard of him. I've never seen anything about him. So they've established, they've at least given a character a good launch pad from that. And there was another quick match, Bull Dempsey versus Mojo Rawley, and I really want to highlight this match because this match accomplished more in a minute. Like, the bell-to-bell time was about a minute. This match accomplished more in a minute than most matches on Raw do in 5 or 10. It was a feud ender. It was a grudge match. The feud had been built up over a couple weeks, stemming from their falling out during the tag title tournament. So there was a story there. The two characters are polar opposites of each other, so there's that instant character clash that kind of makes sense. And Bull Dempsey got, they made him look strong. He basically went in there and just murdered Mojo. Excuse me, and debuted kind of a new finisher with the diving headbutt. It's like, oh, there's more to Bull than just brawling and power moves. He can actually do some high-flying stuff as well. It wasn't like some of Ryback's squash matches where I could set a watch to it. It was just the same match over and over and over again. Meat hook clothesline, feed me more will be in there, and then picks him up, marching round the ring, shell shock, and it's the same exact match over and over again. But Bull got a squash match victory by doing different things that he normally doesn't do, and I like it. I like that kind of stuff where a character shows that there's more to him than what you may have expected, or there's still a lot about Bull Dempsey that we don't know, and more and more of it comes out. And again, kind of like a Goldberg thing, where Goldberg would always throw out new moves to kind of freshen up his matches and not let all of his squashes look exactly the same. And granted, they all ended spear jackhammer, but they found ways to kind of play with the formula a little bit and make it different, and that's what they did here. And Bull came off much stronger as a character after this match was over, and again, that's something that they usually struggle to achieve on Raw. So I did want to highlight that. I thought that was honestly one of the best booked parts of the show. Next up was the NXT debut of Kenta, who has now been renamed Hideo Itami, and it is, I think that was his name, but it's nice that they gave a new name to somebody that doesn't sound so jarring and just uncomfortable to say. Hideo Itami, I think I'm saying that right. Actually, sounds like a perfectly normal name, so it's actually not that bad. I thought his debut came off well, except for the part where he started speaking Japanese and nobody knew what he was saying, and it seemed to go on a little long and it was a little awkward. And they could have gotten around that by either A, having a translator, or B, having subtitles. Because when they went for that long of a stretch without him speaking English, I mean, it's really hard to react when you don't know what the guy's saying. But other than that, I thought it came off well, and I thought they did a good job of presenting his appearance like it was a big deal. And having him beat up the Ascension afterwards, I'm like, wow, I mean, those are two of your unbeatable guys, and you're having Kenta fight them both off. They must really have big plans for him. And, he's going to start his in-ring portion of his NXT run, I think, on the very next show. So it will be interesting to see how he does, how he adjusts, and how his style fits in with the NXT product. And I look forward to seeing it because, they've done a pretty good job of making it seem like getting him is a really big deal. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But next up on the wrestling side of things, we had Charlotte defending the NXT Women's Championship against Bayley. Now, I know that everybody's caught up in praising the four-way match, and I'm going to get into that, obviously, in a few minutes, but I do have to say, I think my favorite match on the show was Charlotte versus Bayley. It was just such an engaging story, and it was so well worked on both sides. I mean, Charlotte is just... she's proven to me that the match with Natalya wasn't just a one-night thing, and it wasn't just Natalya making a great match out of something. Charlotte really is good, and just a great worker. But I got so engaged in the story because Bayley really is such a likable character, and her charm and sweetness and happiness, it doesn't feel like this phony baloney cartoon character thing that you see with a lot of other WWE characters like John Cena. It feels like this is naturally her personality, and it's a fun personality, so she's very easy to like and very easy to root for, and she has this nice little spunky underdog thing going for her. And the match was so good and so exciting, and I was pulling for her so hard that when she lost, I was legit kind of sad. I was like, oh, poor Bayley. I mean, I wasn't sad in that way that a lot of smart fans are, where it's like, oh, well, she should have won because she's the better worker or anything like that. No, I was legit sad for the character that she lost. I legit felt bad for her, and I like it when I get lost in the story like that. I'm supposed to get lost in the story. I do it with movies and television shows. Why can't I do it with professional wrestling, And some people get so caught up in the fact that wrestling is scripted that they don't let themselves get sucked into the story as much, but I got sucked into this one totally, and I thought it was a very good match, and I really liked it, and again, I felt bad for Bayley afterwards, and it was kind of, the ending afterwards, made me feel sorry for her even more, but, I just thought that all came off very, very well. But that leads into the main event, Fatal 4-Way for the NXT World title, Adrian Neville versus Tyler Breeze versus Tyson Kidd versus Sami Zayn. This was great. It was a great action-packed match that highlighted the strengths of all four guys. I think Sami Zayn and Tyler Breeze are the two strongest characters in there, and they amped up the match on that side of things, and all four of them are great athletes, so they were able to construct a very good, very athletic display that wasn't just a finisher fest. That was my main problem with the Battleground 4-Way, where they basically just spammed finishers. The only one that did anything cool was Roman Reigns. And unfortunately, Roman Reigns has kind of gotten stale and repetitive since then, but that's another topic. But I thought this match came off amazingly well. And, more highlights to the NXT booking. Actually, the review I read, I think it was James Caldwell with The Torch. He said that, it really does add a lot that they mentioned that Adrian Neville has not been beaten in 2014, so that when he does lose, it'll actually feel like a big deal. And it's like, yeah, that's one of the reasons I don't like non-title matches. The champion should be hard to beat, and when you do beat them, it should feel like a big deal. And the champions get beat so frequently that it really doesn't feel like that big of a deal when they lose. But here in NXT, they've done a fantastic job of protecting their champions. Charlotte, I think I've only seen her lose one tag match since I've started watching NXT. The Ascension, this is the first time I've seen them lose since I started watching, and I've never seen Adrian Neville lose. So they do a very good job of making their champions seem untouchable, and on the flip side, they do a very good job of setting up their contenders for the most part. Like I said, with this match, the only contender I wasn't buying was Tyson Kidd, and not that I don't like the heel turn, it's just more I don't think they gave him enough wins to really warrant him being in that spot, but other than that, I mean, Tyler Breeze obviously belongs in there, and Sami Zayn wins most of the time, so he belongs in there. And so from a booking standpoint, that all made sense and everything just kind of clicked, and it was just this wonderful, well-done, athletic match. And, Tyler Breeze was great as the opportunist that was trying to sneak out a win. When Neville hit the shooting star press and Breeze threw him off and tried to go for the pin, I thought that was going to be the finish of the match. And I jumped out of my chair. I was like, oh my God, I think Breeze got it. And that was a great moment. When Sami Zayn was on fire towards the end of the match, I thought he was going to win the match right there. And obviously they did that great finish where Neville pulled out the referee to prevent the pin, and in essence kind of stole the victory, and makes you wonder, is there going to be a heel turn there? And that's another thing I have to praise him for, the booking. The two guys I wanted to win this match were Sami Zayn or Tyler Breeze. Those were my two picks. It didn't happen. The belt stayed with the champion, and Neville I've kind of been harsh on. He's not that great on the stick. He's not as flashy or as interesting of a character as... Like, Sami Zayn is the perfect underdog character and is really likable and fun. And Tyler Breeze is just a fantastic heel. He's Shawn Michaels meets Gorgeous George, and he's just wonderful. And he plays the character to the hilt. And he's just fantastic. And I praise him all the time. But, they took an ending that, quite honestly, I didn't want. And they made it work and made me think, ooh, maybe they can go this direction with it, and we'll get Zayn versus Neville one-on-one, with Zayn ultimately winning the title. So even by not giving me the finish they wanted, they managed to present something that was interesting and made me want to continue watching NXT. So NXT TakeOver 2 Fatal 4-Way was once again an outstanding show from NXT. I don't think it was as good as TakeOver 1 back in May, but it was still a very solid show. It all comes down to booking and execution, and NXT does that really well. And that's something I do want to highlight in comparing NXT to the rest of WWE programming. NXT is just so much better than Raw. It's astounding. It really is that NXT is just that much better than Raw. And I've heard the argument that some people have made where it's like, well, Raw's the entertainment show and NXT is more of a wrestling purist show. And that's why you like NXT more, because you're more of a diehard wrestling fan and you like the more pure wrestling show. And I'm like, no, NXT's just better. It's written better, it's booked better, it's presented better. The characters are better. They're more entertaining. Tyler Breeze, Bayley, Enzo Amore, Big Cass, the Vaudevillains, and so many other characters are so much funnier, more engaging, more interesting. Their motivations make more sense for the most part. Their characters are so much better than the WWE's characters most of the time. Actually, Bo Dallas has been... Whenever I've seen him on NXT, he is twice as funny on NXT than he is in the WWE. On the main roster, and it's like night and day almost. That whole bit they did with the whole, I call it the Keystone Cops bit that they did with him being kicked out when he was Mr. NXT and everything, and they did all of that, and that was all hilarious, and I was just in stitches the whole time. And Bo Dallas has very rarely been able to be that funny on the main show. And what it comes down to a lot of the time, I think the 1 hour format definitely helps NXT because it prevents them from getting stale and overexposed, and it prevents characters from being overexposed, and I think that's a lot of it, because Raw really struggles to fill those 3 hours, and there are some shows where I really do feel the 3 hours, and then some. It gets crazy. But NXT is just a better show. It's just a better show all around. It's got all the bases covered. It's more entertaining. The build-ups are better. The characters are better. The presentation is better. It's just better. And if WWE was able to apply that style of booking and that style of logic and that form of entertainment into their flagship show with the bigger stars, the WWE product would be so much better right now. But Speaking of that, let's get into Night of Champions. Night of Champions is happening this Sunday, and I've got to preview it because, that's the thing I do. And going over the card, it's just, it kind of reflects kind of the weaker quality of the shows coming out of SummerSlam, where it's not an awful card, it's just a dull one it feels like they just kind of slapped it together. And some of these build-ups aren't really doing it for me, and, just various other things. But let's get into the main card. Let me start off with Mark Henry versus Rusev, because I do want to talk about this with Raw, and I just got done finishing Raw right before I started filming. They closed out Raw with the Mark Henry-Rusev Showdown segment, and I'm sure, I haven't read any reviews of Raw or seen too many reactions to it. I'm sure that's going to put a lot of people off, because we have this Pavlovian dog thing where we're conditioned to think that the main focus of the show should be the world title feud, and it should be whatever the main event feud is. But personally, to keep things fresh, I don't mind if they keep the main focus on other feuds. Like if one week they decided to showcase the Intercontinental title feud as sort of the main event feud of the show. I think back to that episode of Raw in '96 when the whole show was basically built around Mr. Perfect's heel turn and Triple H stealing the IC title from Mark Marrow. I mean, that was the main angle of the show, and it was for the Intercontinental title. And I'm not saying it was the greatest episode of Raw ever, but it keeps things fresh when you aren't just pounding the world title feud down our throats, and you're able to freshen it up a little bit by showcasing other feuds in the main event spot. That said, I wish they had picked a better segment to go with to kind of illustrate my point and highlight my philosophy, because the Henry-Rusev segment, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it was just kind of dull and dry and paint by numbers, USA is better. No, it's not. Fuck you. Fuck you too. I just think if Mark Henry was still sexual chocolate, he'd be trying to fuck Lana. It'd be the greatest thing ever. But, sexual chocolate. That was still the peak of Mark Henry's career. Don't care. Don't care what anybody says. But, anyway, this match is okay in continuing to build up Rusev. I think they've done a pretty good job of keeping him as a monster, and as unbeaten. I think they've done a decent job with that. And I think Mark Henry presents an interesting physical challenge for the character, where he's clearly stronger and bigger than Rusev, so Rusev is actually going to have to employ a more athletic strategy to take down Henry. Now, I do think Rusev should go over, because if they built up Rusev with this unbeaten streak and then give it away to Mark Henry, who has had his best years and will probably be injured again next week, because Mark Henry is very injury prone, and that's not a new thing. That's been going on for a long time. Hopefully Rusev would go over. I mean, they built up too much into him just to throw it away on Mark Henry, but as long as they keep the match short, it should be okay. They shouldn't get into too much trouble. If they have them go like 10 minutes, I think it's going to lead into a dull match. I'm just thankful they finally moved on from the swagger thing, because that was another one of those things where the setup was fine, the character clash made sense, but they did the match like 18 times, and by the 12th time I was kind of bored with it already. So a feud that only lasted 2 months, they actually did an insane amount of matches to the point that it actually made the feud boring. So I do think it's a fresh matchup for Rusev, and hopefully he goes over. And like I said, as long as they keep the match short, it should be okay. And as the Bull Dempsey Mojo Rawley from TakeOver showed, a short match that builds the character is perfectly fine on a pay-per-view. I don't mind squash matches being on pay-per-views. I don't mind 30-second matches being on pay-per-views, as long as they serve the purpose, help continue the story, build a character, or serve some kind of overall purpose to the grand scheme of things. I mean, some of those 30-second ECW title matches they used to do were pointless, because the title's pointless, nobody cares, and the person carrying the belt was usually pointless and nobody cared. So a 30-second match that nobody's going to remember and help nobody, people will forget about it. So so I'm not against short matches on pay-per-view. I just think they've got to be done with purpose. So there's that. I think Rusev is going to go over in that case. We have the Divas Championship triple threat. It'll be Paige versus AJ Lee versus Nikki Bella. I don't give a shit about the Bella situation that they've been doing. It's yielded some awful television over the last few weeks. And I'm kind of bored with the AJ Page thing. I feel like I've seen the match 18 times. Again, that's another one. They haven't been feuding that long, but it feels like they have. Just because they've done the match so many times. And it's kind of worn out its welcome. The only thing they can really do with this that I would find interesting is if they somehow use this to springboard into AJ versus Stephanie McMahon. Because I actually think that could be an interesting feud if they want to go that route. But I think Brie Bell is going to interfere, and Stephanie might interfere, and that'll lead to Paige coming away with a screwy victory. So that's what'll happen there. Then we have the Intercontinental title match. It's Dolph Ziggler versus The Miz. It's a rematch from last month, so it's kind of a repeat. I would think Ziggler would keep the title. Hopefully the match is good. Their match last month was alright, so, I'm not too worried about that. It's just, I wish they had done a better job making the IC title match more interesting. But I would hope that Ziggler would keep the title. U.S. title match, we've got Sheamus versus Cesaro. I've already talked about how badly booked this is, where Cesaro won the Battle Royal at WrestleMania, got the trophy, got Paul Heyman as a manager, broke away from the Real Americans, and it seemed like he was on the rise to something great. Then they took Paul Heyman away from him. Then they jobbed him out for 2 months. To the point that he was losing on the pre-show to Rob Van Dam. And then all of a sudden he wins 2 matches and he's in line to win a title. And one of the matches he won was over Rob Van Dam, which really only makes the series 50-50. It doesn't really elevate Cesaro into some grand level where he should be getting a shot at a belt. And I'm not bashing Cesaro, I'm bashing the booking. They did a horrible job of setting him up as a contender for the belt. I wouldn't be surprised if he won, because they've done shit like that before, where a guy will be a jobber and then next week he's a champion, just because, yay! Yay, who cares about long-term planning and, setting up belts to be important? Nah, it doesn't matter. I'm going to count on Sheamus to retain, but this match is just kind of pointless. Again, I think the two can go out there and have a good athletic match with each other. It's just that they're going to be fighting from downhill because... or they're going to be fighting uphill to kind of make this match work, because there's no reason to really give a shit about this. Because they did such a horrible job of setting up the contender, and the belt means nothing, so who cares? Tag title match. We've got Stardust and Goldust challenging the Usos. Why are Stardust and Goldust heels? They're too awesome to be heels. I like them. I want to like them. Why are you force-feeding me them as heels? I'll tell you why. Because they foolishly had the Usos beat the Wyatts in their tag title feud. And since then, the Usos have had no heels left to work with, so... Alright, fuck it. We'll just turn Goldust and Stardust heel, and that'll be your feud. I would hope that Goldust and Stardust would get the belts, because okay, if the Usos win, what else do you do with them? I'm not hating on the Usos. Again, I think it would be better for the tag titles if you had the belts on heels, because the Usos have nobody left to work with on the heel side of things. But if they do what I want, they give me the heel champions, you're putting it on 2 guys that, quite honestly, I don't think should be heels. So, oh well. I don't know. I think it should have been the Wyatts winning the belts, and then you build up Stardust and Goldust as the challengers, and then do face weirdos versus heel weirdos. I think that would have been a fun feud, but no. Okay then. Whatever. What else? I think we have Chris Jericho versus Randy Orton. Random match is random. I don't care. It came the fuck out of nowhere, and it looks like Jericho's going to be finishing up this latest run, so Orton's going to win. Whatever. Match might be good, but there's no real storyline reason to really give a shit about this. Moving on, Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins, which they oddly did on Raw this week, so I don't know if they're going to change something at the pay-per-view. Roman Reigns won on Raw, so what's the point of doing the match again on pay-per-view? I kind of don't like that, but... okay, I don't get why they did that. Again, filling that 3 hours is hard. You got to give away pay-per-view matches, in order to fill the time. But I would think that they would change this up somehow, some way. I expect Dean Ambrose to make his presence felt. Again, if they do this match again, I don't know, but I'm more looking forward to seeing what will happen when Dean Ambrose comes back and they build up an eventual payoff to him versus Seth Rollins. Again, I've already stated my feelings. Main event of Hell in a Cell, Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins. They get the only Hell in a Cell match on the card, and they close the pay-per-view. I think that's the way it should be. I've made that. I've made those feelings very clear. Again, giving this main event spotlight to a very hot grudge match, I think, is the good idea. Are they going to do Roman Reigns versus Triple H? Because that was a match that people seemed interested in a few months ago, and they kind of dropped it. So I don't know. They need to find something to fix Roman Reigns because he's really getting stale and kind of boring. And I would hate for him to join the ranks of Sheamus and John Cena as those boring baby faces that are just, do the same thing every week. But speaking of John Cena, my boy, my favorite wrestler in the history of the universe, John Cena. The good saint of saints, John Cena, the friend of all children, like Gamera. I'm a better friend to children than Gamera. That's what I am. I'm John Cena. John Cena versus Brock Lesnar in a SummerSlam rematch for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. Brock Lesnar is going in as the champion. This match is pointless because I just don't think this match needs to happen again. You told your story at SummerSlam. Lesnar destroyed Cena. That's your story. And it puts the heat and the credibility on Brock as champion, builds him up as a monster. And then, to me, they should just be building up to their next title match. I threw out the idea of doing Lesnar versus Orton at this pay-per-view just because we've never seen that match on any kind of a grand level. Somebody pointed out to me that they had a match on SmackDown back in 2002, but that was before Orton was worth anything. They've never done that match before, and they kind of have this place with Orton where he's kind of on the outside looking in. You've got Lesnar as the champion, and you've got Seth Rollins as kind of the favorite son of the Authority because he's the Money in the Bank holder. So Orton's kind of been pushed down in their favor, and I thought maybe they'd do some kind of story with that where he turns on the Authority or whatever and tries to take down Lesnar. That was just something they could have done. But doing the Cena match again, the way I would book this, I would just have Lesnar kill him again. I mean, why mess with that story? I don't know what the point would be in taking that away from Brock, that he obliterated John Cena at SummerSlam. There's no reason to undo that. There's no reason to try and take that away from Brock's character, because I think it enhances him that he beat Undertaker at WrestleMania, which has never happened, and he destroyed John Cena at SummerSlam, which has never happened before. So whoever beats Brock is going to be beating the guy that ended the streak and is the only person in history to squash John Cena. That's the character you've established with Brock, and I think if they do a 50-50 match with Cena, regardless of who goes over, I think that'll take away from that a little bit. So I don't like that they're doing this match. And if Cena wins, I swear to God... you basically just fucked your Mania build-up. That's what you will be doing if you have John Cena go over, and it will be terrible and awful, and don't you dare do it. Just don't you dare. You're killing your long-term potential here by doing that. And what's the point? I mean, so Cena becomes a 16-time champion. To quote Austin Powers, whoop-de-doo, Basel. What would the point be? I mean, what upside is there to having Cena win? I don't get it. And they did it on Raw this week, even the whole tempting Cena to the dark side and turning heel, even that angle is worn out, because they've done it like 2 or 3 times, and it's like, oh my God. Attacking John Cena's dad, trying to tempt him into turning heel, some of y'all like this, some of y'all don't. I mean, these are all things that have been done to fucking death with John Cena. The character is just so stale and so boring, and he better not win on Sunday. And even if Seth Rollins cashes in the Money in the Bank or something crazy like that, it's still, you're undoing what you've established with Brock, and I don't see the point in undoing that at this point. I think you can create a good story and build a new character by keeping Brock as the part-time champion. I think that, and again, that's keeping him as the part-time champion is something that could elevate other feuds, other storylines, and other characters. Kind of like what I talked about, where you can highlight other feuds in the main event segments of Raw. Let other angles be the main focus of the show. Let Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins main event Hell in a Cell. That to me should be their spot. And I think it'll be easier to do things like that if you have Lesnar as your part-time champion. So I don't see any reason to undo that at this point. And it'll make title matches mean more. Because that's another thing. I see title matches so frequently that they carry no weight. And, you know, a lot of times you forget about them a month later. I mean, that Battleground 4-Way is one of the most pointless matches I've ever seen because we all knew Cena was going to win. The match itself was not that good. It had no drama, no intrigue, no nothing. It was just a nothing match that they put on there because we're all conditioned to think that every pay-per-view should have a world title match on it, when the match was just the most pointless thing ever. There was no reason to do that match. And if anything, it hurt Roman Reigns because he lost at a pay-per-view main event, his first world title main event, and you hurt Roman Reigns by having him lose. I mean, granted, he didn't take the pin, but, you know, he walked into his first world title match and was unsuccessful. Actually, I take that back. He lost 2 world title matches in a row because you put him in the Money in the Bank for the title the month before. So, you know, it would have been more beneficial if you didn't do that match, at least for Roman Reigns' long-term build-up. But, you know, that's just me spouting off. But Night of Champions, I'm hoping it's a good show. My hope isn't very high. I'm just kind of looking at this card and I just go, whatever. But in any case, that's the card. If you have not seen NXT TakeOver 2, I highly recommend it. I thought it was a very good show. And, you know, one of the more enjoyable wrestling experiences I've had this year is NXT continues to provide me with quality wrestling, and I appreciate that from them. But that is all I have for now. I will be back next week with a review of Night of Champions and hopefully a couple of other things as well. But until then, you all enjoy your week, and peace out.